Before we begin today's show, we pause to honor a life that mattered. This live stream is sponsored by Support Our Shields, a mission-driven organization preserving the legacy of our fallen officers. Please take a moment to reflect as we share the story of a hero gone too soon.
On January 15th, Deputy Vargas was tragically shot and killed while serving a warrant in Southwest Houston. And at the time, he was working as part of the U.S. Marshals Gulf Coast Violent Offenders Task Force. The suspect opened fire on Deputy Vargas, who was later pronounced dead at the hospital.
Houstonians will keep this family in our prayers. I've visited with Mrs. Vargas. They have 3 children. They're devastated, and it shows the dedication and commitment of our first responders. Deputy
Vargas was a 17-year veteran of the Brazoria County Sheriff's Office, joining the force back in 2007. And he was known throughout the department for his dedication, professionalism, and commitment to public safety. Beyond his badge, Deputy Vargas was a devoted husband and a father of 3. And his loss is felt by his family, friends, and those of the community that he selflessly served.
Grace and peace, you guys. Welcome back to Unshakable with April Chapman, where we discuss all things social, cultural, political, and theological from a biblical perspective. As you can see, we're doing something a little different. I am sitting down with my friend and brother in the Lord, Adam B. Coleman. Adam is the author of The Children We Left Behind. He's also founder of Wrong Speak Publishing. He is a frequent contributed to the New York Post and Newsweek and so many other publications. He is a husband. He is an amazing author, and I'm excited.
Thank you.
I'm excited to be sitting with you today.
That was a great intro, by the way.
Oh, you're welcome. I remember we had been following each other a while on social media, and then you reached out and you was like, "Hey, I'm coming to Atlanta. You know, can we link up? Can we create some content?" I said, "Absolutely, absolutely." So far, what do you think of AT Hale?
Well, it's not my first time in Atlanta. It's interesting.
Yes.
I don't want to trash Atlanta.
Why not?
You're like, oh, I do it all the time.
Yes.
It's weird. As my friend puts it, it's either bougie or ratchet.
See, there's no in between.
There's no in between.
And I don't even know where I fit. Well, I mean, I'm on the spec because you had sent me your book a couple of months ago. And I was so grateful that you wanted me to read it and be exposed to your writing. You are a prolific writer.
Thank you.
And I'm grateful that we have what I call purposeful patriarchs, these strong Black American men who are letting their voices be heard and putting pen to paper and are writing. So the first question I want to ask you with this book, The Children We Left Behind, it kind of reads like a memoir, but it also provides so much insight as to some of the cultural issues that we are seeing today. Obviously, we don't want you to give away the book. And I do have some questions prepared that will allow you to critique some of the topics you bring up. But It starts with your origin story. Talk to me about that.
I'm the child of a single mother. It was myself and my sister. We were born, I was born in Detroit. I believe my sister was born in Detroit. Actually, that's a good question. She's the older sister, so I never think.
Right, we don't even care about the other siblings. Life begins when we make our advent into the world.
my father was always married, but he was married to somebody else. So we were effectively the other kids.
Wow.
And that's how it felt throughout my entire childhood.
So you knew
Yeah.
you were the other children.
Yeah. Well, actually, I didn't find out until writing this book. See, there's so much this book allowed for me to like actually have like a adult conversation with my mom about
Right.
certain things. And I didn't know he didn't have kids with his wife. And she also let me know that I have a sister somewhere from
Wow.
some other woman he has zero relationship with.
Right.
So yeah, I don't know how to do.
And so it sounds like, I mean, your story's not that unique.
Yeah.
Okay. Like
That's the problem.
I don't come from the picture perfect family either. You know, my father had other children before he met my mom, and then I have a brother after me. Then I had some other siblings that came kind of popped up just out the blue that you meet in a grocery store. And from your vantage point, though, how does that impact your development and social adjustment in the world as a child?
Well, in hindsight, I'm able to look at it. Hindsight is 2020.
Right.
It affected me when it came to my self-esteem. That was a recurring issue throughout my childhood and leading into my adult years.
How so? So you were able to connect self-esteem or the lack thereof to the fact that I am the outside child of this man who is not in this bona fide relationship with my mom. Wow.
Well, especially because you asked me before we started, where did I grow up?
Yeah.
So, I was born in Detroit. We left around, I think it was about 6, and then moved to Virginia for about a year or so, then moved to upstate New York. It was Fairfax County.
Okay.
Yeah,
Northern Virginia.
Yeah. And then we moved to upstate New York. And we were there for some years, and then eventually, like in my teenage years, was it 8th grade, I moved to New Jersey.
Right.
And essentially been in New Jersey since. I left for New Jersey. I left for Tennessee for about a year and then came back to New Jersey, but essentially been in New Jersey since. Yeah. But all that moving around, like just to give people an idea, basically from the age of 6 to 8, I lived in 3 states.
Wow, that's only 24 months.
Yeah. So
that's hard.
There's a lot that was going on. And on top of that, I didn't see my father. Like, we left the state.
Right.
We were gone,
Did you have questions like, hey, where's dad? Why are we here and he is there? Or were you that kid that kind of like, we don't ask questions, we don't ask, we don't judge, you just go along?
I don't remember dialogue, but I remember how I felt.
Okay.
I think that it's a lot easier to remember how you feel as a kid.
Right.
And a lot of my childhood was just confusing and not feeling welcome. So even when we left Detroit, we moved to Virginia, we stayed with some extended family for a little bit, but I felt like we weren't welcomed. And granted, we weren't there that long. It was kind of like we're staying there for a little bit till we get our own place.
Right.
But it felt like we were intruding.
You're like we're in the way.
Right, exactly. Quite literally, felt like I was in the way. When we left Virginia, we moved upstate New York. We were staying with extended family. And
same sentiment.
Same kind of feeling. So much so that my sister recalls, because she's 4 years older, so she has a much stronger memory about things that happen.
Right.
For me. We were staying at this relative's house. I think I was coming out of the bedroom to go to the kitchen, and she yelled at me, and I peed myself. I'm just scared.
Oh, right.
So I believe, I could be wrong, but I believe my sister told my mom what happened. All I remember is coming home from school, getting off the bus, my mom says, "We're leaving." She wanted me out of that environment.
Right.
But we didn't have anywhere to go. So we were homeless. And we went to some hotel rooms. I think it was a Motel 6. We stayed there for a bit. My mom ran into this lady who had a trailer. She had a spare room. She was like, "You can stay here." So
in the trailer, a spare room in the trailer.
Yeah.
Okay.
So all 3 of us stayed in that room for about a month or so until my mom had saved up enough to get an apartment. So all of that's what I'm saying, within the 2 years, the homelessness, the moving, not being wanted, all these different things. And essentially when we made it into that apartment, everything should be theoretically fine. But I had a nervous breakdown.
Did you?
Yeah. My sister remembers me being underneath the table in the fetal position, like screaming.
Right.
And I told my mother about me wanting to die.
Right.
And I said to her, you know, if you love me, you help me die. And I was 8 at that point. So, you know, she's a nurse. So she went to the medical professionals. And at that time, and I've had a lot of people say, like, they shouldn't have told her to do that. But at that time, they told her to have me admitted. So all I remember is being in the car, going somewhere I wasn't familiar with,
right,
going into some building, you know, some big facility, and then she's handing me off to somebody and telling me, like, to go with them. And I don't know where I'm at. So it took me like an hour to kind of figure out, like, where am I?
Right.
I was subsequently there for about 3 months.
That's a long time to have been left somewhere and you don't even know what is this place? Why am I here? Is she coming back for me?
Yeah.
This cements a series of traumas that so many young people, and I don't want to make this about a black thing or a white thing, but, you know, sinfulness doesn't have any sort of specific ethnicity that it focuses on. We've got white brothers and sisters who have had equally traumatic backgrounds.
Yeah.
But I think it's interesting that this type of instability, this type of trauma, I don't think many of us think about how children are affected by the chaos in our lives.
Yeah. No, that's exactly it. You know, there was so much that was going on. Even just being in that hospital, once again, the word that always comes to mind is confusing.
Right.
Like, I was confused as to why I was there, but I sort of knew why I was there. I eventually figured out why I was there.
Right.
And obviously, like, we have these therapy sessions and stuff like that.
But why are you pressed? Why is it pressed upon you to have the sole responsibility of figuring out why you're there? That's a lot for a child to have to work through.
Yeah.
So thinking back, would you say that a conversation was like, hey, you're going through a rough patch right now, these people are going to help you? Or it was, we're going for a ride and you just show up? Honestly,
I think I just needed talk therapy.
Okay.
I shouldn't have been admitted. And I don't remember feeling like I'm about to grab a knife and kill myself or anything like that. Because even I told my mom that I wanted to get under my bed and wait for it to fall on me.
Right.
Which is a very, like, it's a kid way of thinking. Obviously, like, I'm in distress.
Yes.
And so I don't know how to express it. And that's part of the issue, is that adults think like adults, but they forget what it's like to be a kid.
Right.
And they expect a kid to express themselves the same way an adult would express themselves. And they can't. So they might look at a behavior. They might look at them being rebellious. And they're like, they want to discipline the rebellion, but not fix the reason why they're rebellious. And often rebellion is because they want more of you, not less of you. But for me, it was just constantly feeling like I'm not good enough. Like I'm being discarded. And that's why a lot of people are saying, you know, you shouldn't have been admitted, because obviously you're dealing with abandonment issues. And here they go, abandoning you. In this facility. And the thing I always say about being in that facility is that, you know, when you go to jail and you get 3 months, you know how long you're there for. Right. You can count the days. But when you go into a facility like that, you don't know how long you're there. Really? Yeah. It's up to someone else's discretion to decide that it's time for you to go. So imagine an 8-year-old boy wondering if today is going to be the day I get to go home. And then what made it worse was that my mom would come and visit me, you know, and she would routinely come and see me. And I'm asking her, like, am I going home today? Right. And she would have to tell me no. What do you think were her reasons for, do you think that she was just dealing with her own
trauma and instability and felt that this was the best thing for you because it was the best that she could offer at the time?
My mom, I didn't actually throughout my entire life, I've never blamed my mom for having me admitted.
Right.
I've always seen it as my mom's a medical professional. She went to the medical professionals. This was their recommendation.
And she's thinking she's doing the right thing.
Right. But it's, she obviously doesn't enjoy it. She didn't want to get rid of me. She loves me. But she doesn't know what to do. And the professionals are saying to do this. So,
were you acting out prior to this? Or
no.
like when that break happened, it was just that?
I've always been a quiet, well-behaved, quiet, introverted kid. Like,
right.
Some kids fight, some kids, they're external. When they're frustrated, they want to, do things like that. I was the opposite. I would get quieter.
You'd internalize.
I'd internalize everything. So I was always kind of like that. I was always very like thinking about stuff and internally processing stuff. Does this make sense? And things like that. But after I went in, even my mother says I was different.
In what ways?
More withdrawn.
So it didn't help.
No. And being in that place, I didn't learn anything.
Right.
I just learned that listen to what they say so you can get out of here. That was essentially
so you learned to conform to whatever their standard or requirement was. And to you, that's the answer of getting out. But it doesn't really address the root cause of what's going on with you, which is, on some level, we have to talk about fatherlessness. Yeah. We have to talk about that, the abandonment issues. In our community, in a lot of these urban contexts, if you've watched my show, you've heard me talk about the matriarchal squalor. Mm-hmm. And we've talked about this generation, multi-generations of bastards raising bastards, and just repeating the same cycle of toxicity, thinking that, if I keep doing the same thing, it's going to yield different results. But then when it doesn't and things start to get worse, no one is taking an autopsy and stepping back and saying, what's going on with us? Do you think your book kind of does that a little bit? That it kind of just peels back the covers and says, this is what the children we leave behind, these are some of the stories that we're not talking about. Yes.
The sole purpose of it was actually, I would say the primary focus is to put a spotlight on the conduct of the adults and the selfishness, like just calling it for what it is.
Sounds like accountability. Yes. Sounds like you're trying to bring, as Anton Daniels would say, bring them to the front of the congregation. Yep. And let's have a discussion about the accountability, because for us, a lot of times we try to move the accountability away from the adults in our lives and explain it away. Mm-hmm. Are you saying that is not helpful?
No. I will say this, writing this book, for one, my mom didn't know I was writing this book. Like, I asked her questions, but she just thought I was asking questions. And she might watch this. She watches all my stuff. But I didn't tell her, not because I was trying to hurt her or anything like that. Right. And matter of fact, anytime I talk about my mom, people have come up to me like, your mom's so strong. Like, she went through all that. She dealt with this. And I'm being honest while also honoring my mother, right?
That's hard.
Yeah, it is hard. And I will say that it initially hurt her to read because there were things she didn't know that I was going through either. Right. So as a parent, you don't want to hear that your child is going through these things.
Right.
So she didn't know how I was suffering because I stopped sharing my suffering. And, if I'm in hindsight, I think it's because of that. I shared my suffering and I got locked up. Right. So I've always just kind of kept it to myself. Even with like all the stuff I've been doing, like sharing my opinion, is the polar opposite of everything I've done throughout my life.
Right.
My political opinions, personal thoughts, I just kept it to myself because no one cares what I think anyways. So that was how I always perceived myself. But sharing how I felt, it hurt my mom to know that I was going through that.
Right.
But I was also like critiquing certain things, and certain things, my mother falls into those categories. And
give me some of those critiques that, this might be difficult Childhood trauma is never easy for any of us
Yeah.
to talk about. However, I think it's good and healthy when we can critique. And I've done an autopsy on my own childhood and the fatherlessness that I experienced as well. Talk to us about some of those. You said you had to ask questions, and now here comes the critique. What are some of those?
Well, the harsher critiques are actually towards my father, which is because it's the easiest.
Okay.
Like
Is it because men are easy targets, or they bear the brunt of the responsibility, or should?
Well, I'm very much so equal opportunity within the book.
Okay.
I don't say, that's why I don't even call it a fatherlessness issue. I say childhood abandonment.
So you take it off of the parent and put the focus on the child as the object of the abandonment.
Right. And either parent can abandon their children.
Yes.
And I've seen many such cases.
Mm-hmm.
And just because they're physically there doesn't mean they're not abandoning them.
Right.
So that's where the selfishness and things like that come into play.
Okay.
But I would say it's easier for me to use my father as an example because he just wasn't there.
Right.
And a lot of people, like the reflex, especially from other men, is like, well, you don't know the circumstance and things like that.
Right.
And I would say, okay, that's fair, but that's not my circumstance.
Right.
And the reason I know that is because my mother never kept my father from me. She never.
Right.
If he came around,
go see your daddy.
Yeah. Then he would say. So he always stayed in Detroit. We were bouncing around in the Northeast,
right?
But he always lived in Detroit. He would come and drive through maybe once every other year or something. Like it was very.
So he kind of knew where you guys were, but
but he didn't call either.
Right, I was about to say he didn't call and he didn't demonstrate a vested interest as to, wait, you guys are moving again. Where are you? What do you need something? Are you okay?
No, he had no idea what was going on. Like I can't.
What do you mean?
I played baseball. My dad never came to any games. I don't even think he knew I played baseball.
Right.
Like there were so many different things that were happening throughout my life. Like he wasn't there. And the times that he did come through, so he was a tailor.
Okay.
I think he had a dry cleaning shop. But they would do some tailor work.
Right.
He would drive from Detroit to go to New York City to get fabric.
Makes sense.
While we lived in New York and New Jersey, so he would stay with us. But he wasn't there to see his kids. He was there to go to New York City. And
he needed a place to stay.
Right.
Stop.
Yeah. And I felt that as a kid. Like, he's not really here to see us.
Right.
There was one time,
stop.
right? It was a pit stop. There was one time he did take me into New York City with him. So you think, all right, well, at least he's coming through. Did he at least take you with? Like,
right.
No, I just remember one time. One time he took me when he was actually at our place. Mm-hmm. We didn't really interact.
No, not like, hey, so what you been up to? How's school?
That's the extent of my father and I's dialogue was, how are you? How was school? Fine. That's it. Okay.
But there was no relationship there.
Zero.
Wow. See, I was that kid. Now, I didn't see my dad a lot either. I always knew where he was. He always knew where we were. We'd have phone calls. But I was the kid. I wasn't letting you out. On that phone call, I'm like, so why is it that I only seen you 4 times this year? I would ask those very provocative questions. And maybe he stopped calling because he got tired of getting grilled. I don't know. Now, later in life, we ended up having a very decently amicable relationship. Mm-hmm. But it was a whole lot of accountability because I always felt like my dad would put some other woman before me. Whoever he was dating, that was his it girl. And I was on the back burner.
Right. Well, and that is selfish behavior.
Yeah.
See, the whole thing of being a parent, you obviously know this, is that when you become a parent, you sacrifice for your children.
You have to.
Right? But you don't sacrifice when you want to. You have to consistently sacrifice for your children.
Because it's not a sacrifice. It's not supposed to be at your convenience.
Exactly.
That's why it's a sacrifice.
And that also links into love. So
it does.
That's why I can say my father did not love me.
Right. Is that hard? I don't know if he is still alive.
No, he passed away.
He passed away.
Yeah.
Were you guys ever able to reconcile that relationship?
The last time I saw my father, I was 16.
Good grief.
Yeah, he came through. He took me to the mall. That's the most active my father has ever been. He took me to the mall, bought some clothes. The last time I heard from him, so between the age of 16, the last time I heard from him, I was 21. I called him after my son was born.
Right.
And I called him, and I called his shop, someone who worked there. I said, this is Adam, his son, and he put me onto him, and it was just kind of like you're talking to a stranger. It's like,
Right.
what do you want? Like that kind of vibe. Wow. So I talked to him, maybe it was like 2 minutes, because it was just.
You're like, what's the point?
Yeah, he wasn't interested in speaking with me. So after that, I was like, well, I just kind of ended the call, hung up with him. And I told myself, I'm not going to call him anymore. But if he calls me, I'll talk to him. I always left that door open. Maybe one day he wakes up and says, I should have done better. And then we could have this conversation. But he never did. And so for a long time, I just accepted that my father may never talk to me again. And I accepted that. My father doesn't love me. I accepted that.
Right.
And I moved on from there. So when he did pass, the only reason I found out that he died was because my mom happened to Google his name, and he had died a few months before.
That is wild.
Yeah.
So in light of your story, when we talk about how these childhood abandonment influences the society and the broader culture at large, would you agree that perhaps, as you know, top of mind has been all of this Black fatigue and all of the other issues going on in the culture? Can we point at parenting as possibly one of the, proximate causes of why we are seeing so much dysfunction today?
Not one of the problem.
Okay.
It is the problem, because I've become very interested in psychology and human behavior.
Okay.
When we talk about raising kids, what we're trying to do is create habits. Human beings are about habits.
Creatures of habit.
We're creatures of habits, and that quite literally, when you're raising a child, you're getting them the habit of how they respond to the world, how they handle certain situations, how they see themselves, what's their internal dialogue, all these different things. You're creating a habit for them. And that doesn't start when they're 12 or 13. No. It starts at the very beginning. How much love you show them, right? And then when they can start talking and communicating a little bit more, you're teaching them certain things, what to do, what not to do. All of that takes a lot of work. It takes years and years and years of work.
Right.
But especially in the beginning, when you do that work in the beginning, it becomes easier later on, because you've created a habit for them. So they know how to speak to you and how not to speak to you.
Right.
Because you didn't tell them, don't disrespect me at 12. You told them that when they were 1 or 2, right? To not do that. Okay, you can do that. So when you see people who are unruly, have no respect for authority, right? Your parents are your natural authority figures, who maybe despise the opposite sex, right? There's a reason for that.
Right.
It's because, the opposite sex wasn't there for them when they were kids, right?
So that's why they despise the opposite sex.
Correct. So especially, and this is, I have a chapter in there called "The Daughters We Disappoint," because I didn't want this to be just like
for males,
perspective, because I have a lot of female friends, and I have many of them, and my wife included. She grew up without her father.
Right.
There's a lot of there's behavior that is seen between a lot of women who grow up without their fathers, and they may not realize what is like why it's affecting them as adult women. So,
or maybe they don't even realize that the behavior they exhibit is because of the daddy issues.
Right.
I'd love for you to unpack just a few of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, for example, you have the woman who doesn't trust men. Right. And the way I point it is that if her father was, let's say, abusive or not there, but he's the most important male figure in her life.
Right.
And if that guy screws it up, it is more than likely that she's not going to trust that any other guy can surpass the most important male figure in her life.
That makes sense.
So if he was abusive, then her idea of abusive men is that that they're abusive. If he was missing, her idea of men is that they're not dependable, which is why you hear, I'm going to take care of myself.
And I can do it on my own.
I can do it on my own. Right? And some of that is reinforced by the mother.
It is.
But they believe it because they saw that the father wasn't there.
And mother was doing it on her own.
And the mother was doing it. So the men become optional. They're not dependable. So these are the repeat narratives and behaviors that happen over and over and over for them. You have, and let's say it's not to that extent, but let's say for some women, actually, the way I should put it, the reason why the opposite sex parent is important is because it more often than not teach them how to interact with the opposite sex with relationships.
I've heard that too.
Yeah. So the most important parent is the same-sex parent because that's who you're trying to model. But the opposite sex parent teaches how male and female interact with each other. And so if you have a happy and healthy, normal relationship between the mother and father. So we'll just use the daughter as an example. If the daughter sees the father interact and treat the mother with kindness and love and he's affectionate and things of that nature, when she goes into the world and she finds a guy who's a pretty boy and always thinking about himself and saying slick stuff, that guy looks weird to her.
It's like, what's wrong with him?
What's wrong with him? Because she has a model. She has a male model of what a happy and healthy, normal man looks like, someone who is dependable. But if that man is not there, she has no model.
So she's going to insert whatever.
She's almost going to be like a cat with a shiny object. Like she's just chasing stuff because she doesn't know. She doesn't know like as a guy. That's why it's important to have a non-sexual male friend. Which actually should be your father. That's why, the old days, let me bring the boyfriend over to meet my parents. And the father be like, oh, this guy's full of it. Right? Because he can see. Men can see certain things. But if you don't have that experience, you don't have a model, you can't see what we see. But that guy is full of it. And he's going to be abusive.
We definitely don't believe it. We're like, you just don't want us to be happy.
And then what ends up happening is that, especially the pretty boys, do not mess with the pretty boys. Because they especially
They're selfish. They don't care.
They don't care and they don't respect women. And they have the opposite issue. They have the opposite issue when it comes to the opposite sex. They don't trust women.
That's why they're acting that way?
Yes. They don't trust women.
Never thought about that.
And they'll say it sometimes. I watch Maury all the time.
I haven't watched Maury in years. Is it still come on?
No, it's reruns.
Okay.
But see, when you watch shows like that, if you watch it long enough, you peep certain things that people say. It's not always what they want to say. The truth slips out.
It just comes out.
When you see the guy and Maury's like, you got 8 kids. And he's like, why don't you settle down? He's like, Maury, I don't trust women.
I have seen them do that.
And they'll go and describe a woman who's going around sleeping with. And so he uses that as a validation as to why he does the very thing that I can't trust him, so I'm going to go around and sleep with.
Maybe he stole it from his mama.
There's a lot there when it comes to certain, especially because the father wasn't there to protect him. There's a certain dynamic of him seeing his mother in a particular way or how his mother's treating him, and he doesn't trust women because of that, whatever dynamic is happening between him and his mother.
So much of how we learn how to interact with other humans and how to treat one another starts with this family foundation. Now, when we shift to the culture, we saw something fundamentally, I think, just put us on a bad track to nowhere. And that was the rise of BLM. And when we dug deeper into BLM, we saw, these 3 lesbians talking about we got to tear down the heteronormative nuclear family. When you witnessed that, if you can think back to that, what was your initial reaction to BLM? And then when it was discovered that this is who they are, how did that impact your worldview in terms of the trajectory that the Black community was headed? That it was like, we're so far gone. I don't know how we bring us back.
Well, I've been at that point watching what was happening in the college campuses before it hit the streets. So I've been watching, the pink hair feminists screaming stuff at the universities. And everyone thought, well, it's only at the universities. Right. But when it exploded, it went everywhere. And now it's in the lexicon, white supremacy and all these different things.
I never heard those terms growing up.
Exactly.
Like that.
So I've seen that behavior. It's Marxist, thought.
Right.
And so when someone comes to you and says that this Marxist organization, who and Patrice Cullors says we're trained Marxists,
She did
right?
say
So
that.
they don't shy away from it,
No.
right? Saying that they're for breaking up the nuclear family, there's a reason behind it. It's because communists want control. Everything to them is about power.
Right.
Well-intentioned Black people stop doing this. Stop saying rest in power.
Right. That's a communist trope.
It's just
Or
communist.
speaking truth to power.
Right.
Right.
Everything to them is about power. You're giving voice to communist rhetoric.
Right.
So for them, everything. That's why you hear, the power dynamic between that couple. It's like, why are you
speaking those kind of categories?
People don't
right.
I didn't date her because of the power dynamic.
Right.
Why do you see it that way? To them, everything is about power.
So everything's a construct or a category, and it's oppressed versus oppressor. It's a power dynamic.
Exactly.
So they're even looking at relationships that way?
Yeah, exactly.
Wow. Who knew?
And they want to centralize everything, which is why communists want to centralize control to the state.
Kind of like, so it really is the idea that the government is God. And when we say God, we're not actually talking about an actual being, but God in terms of it, the government trumps, it is the highest authority.
Yeah. And then also one thing about them is that they don't always take the hood off so you can see everything that is there.
Right.
What they're trying to do is groom you towards communism. So that's why when you tell people like that's communism, they're like, "Oh, you're crazy."
Right.
The communists, that was it. You have to understand, they're not going to go outright and say, "We need a communist family structure and control things." They'll say, no. We just want community, family. Yeah, just get the community. It starts with the community.
It takes a village.
Right? You don't need the father in the home. The community can help to raise
those reimagined families.
Right. So it's always to first disarm you.
Right.
To get you to accept a slightly bigger picture of what you imagined.
Right.
So that they can take you to the next step where it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So it always starts at some point. So when they said they let it slip as saying defund the police, they were like, no. We just want to have more community policing.
What the heck does that even mean?
Exactly.
No one in the community wants to police itself, because if they did, they'd be doing it.
We just want social workers. We'll bring social workers out there. Everything. Because remember, part of it is to destabilize.
Right.
You can't.
It's working.
Yes. These people aren't builders. They're destroyers.
They're disruptors. They tear down.
Right. And they even say, well, I want to be a disruptor. Right. Not a builder of something good. They want to first disrupt.
Tear down statues.
Tear down old norms.
Right. These new societal norms. So now, this is so off topic, but if I don't get it out, I'll forget. Would you say that the rise of this trans agenda is also part of the Marxist playbook?
Yes.
Because it's a form of disruption, or you said tearing down. Right.
They want to tear down all social norms and even the basics.
Like,
right. So family, right? Mother and father. No. You're a birthing person.
Get out.
So that's why all the basics.
Right.
These aren't like political things that we would normally say. These are very fundamental things.
Birthing person.
Now there's more than just man and woman, right? So everything becomes a construct, right? Everything becomes a social construct. So if it's a social construct, that means that it can be torn apart, reshaped, reimagined, right? But these are fundamental norms that we understand, not just in the Western world, but throughout the world. And it's to cause confusion. So that's how you disrupt. You cause confusion. You get people to accept non-truths, right?
Like that a man can be a woman, or men can have babies, things like that. Now, you would think that, that sounds crazy. How have they been so successful getting people to deny observable reality? Like, I've watched people dig their heels and look at a biological man and say he's a woman, or like I even heard Mark Lamont Hill argue that trans men can have babies.
Well, Mark is special.
Who you telling?
He is very much so of that ilk.
Yes.
The upper class ideologue. And so it does not
the
shock
academics.
me. Right. Yes, upper class academic ideologue, right? Who thinks he's smarter than everybody else.
Right.
Because he actually has a secret formula because he got it in this this institution that you don't have access to. So you need me to tell you how to think. Right? You've been getting it all wrong this entire time. You thought that was your mother? That's a birthing person. What is wrong with you? You're so ignorant. Like, that's their demeanor. It's all very condescending.
Yes.
They think that they've unlocked the truth.
Right.
That has been hidden in some book in some Ivy League school that only they have access to, and you're not smart enough to get it. And you know what? We just have to keep working on you.
Keep working on it. Yeah. How's that working out for you?
Yeah.
You know, I can see that. I think it's interesting, though, that a person like that has the ear of the culture. And then we're confused why our families are messed up, why our children can't think straight. Even though your book, actually, for me, I believe it goes back to these core fundamental things and allows us to do an autopsy on what the heck happened here. We need to deal with this childhood abandonment issue, and not necessarily in theory of physical abandonment, but we're not really parenting these kids anymore.
No, in some ways, and that's what's interesting. Jonathan Haidt's book, The Coddling of the American Mind, in many ways is talking about the helicopter parents, right?
Right.
The sector that is, they grew up anxious, and so they're incredibly anxious when it comes to raising their kids. So they're transporting that anxious behavior onto the child. But what I see more often than not, and I think there's a certain class element when it comes to that helicopter type of parent. So? A little bit.
I don't know. If I call my husband a helicopter dad, I'd be like, ease up. Like, let the babies flap his wings and fly. Because I'm going to push you out the nest parent. I'm like, fly. You bet them flap faster, you're going to hit the ground. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, more so to what Jonathan Haidt's talking about, because he's also focusing on universities and things like that.
Gotcha.
Right? The kids who are there. But more often than not, I think it's the selfish parents who aren't being addressed, right?
Right.
You know, it's the parents who say, well, as long as I'm happy, then my children will be happy.
Right. Or have we've seen a two-family household that may not have been perfect, but where the woman just ups and decides one day because she's not happy, she's just going to up and get a divorce, and that, the children know that we love them and they're going to be just fine after the divorce. And I'm like, how is it that they think that? Well,
this is the rationalization point. You only rationalize things when you know it's not good.
Right.
You know, so if I've been losing weight and I'm on a diet and I say, I know I'm not supposed to have that cookie, but I've been good this week.
I have. And I was thinking about some red velvet over the week for the weekend.
Exactly.
I have been good this week.
But you have to rationalize that.
You're right.
To accept that you're going to do the thing. Nobody, most people.
Did he just call me out? I think he called me out. Guess I'm not going to get the red velvet. Okay, I won't.
You can have the red velvet. It's okay.
I might.
No, but most people don't want to actually think of themselves as a bad person.
Right.
So you have to rationalize bad behavior.
Do you have a degree in psychology? Because normally I don't like the psych types. However, I like you, Adam. I like you a lot because that helped me. I don't think I just had a breakthrough. You know what you were doing wrong, but you rationalize bad behavior to give yourself permission to engage in the bad behavior.
Yeah. And
the divorce is similar. Right.
Right. And you might say, we'll just put them in therapy. They'll be okay. Right.
We'll get them some counseling.
I'm thinking about their mental health.
Right. Well, they shouldn't be in a home where everybody's fighting.
Yeah.
So I'm like, well, stop fighting.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't fight and argue with yourself.
Now, to be fair, it takes two.
It does.
Right. So
I agree.
I've seen it plenty of times where one person is like, let's make this work. And the other person has this big ego. Right. And they've become hell-bent on going their separate way.
Right.
You can't force them to stay. Right. But this is why it is it is both parties to be accountable, to humble themselves,
Right. Put the
and to
pride aside.
sacrifice. And I'm sorry, if your relationship is not as loving as you want it to be, then love each other more.
Come on, Adam. Right. Like, you be the change you want to see.
Right.
I tell women that all the time. They're like, well, he doesn't see me. Okay, well, go see him. Okay, make him the focus, and you take one step. And here's the problem, though. I have found, like, a lot of women, because they're so selfish, they think, oh, well, I tried that once and he didn't respond the way I wanted, so therefore I'm not doing that again.
Right.
Like you said, love each other more. You just focus on what you can do.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and I would also go back to, what's the foundation of your relationship? Like, my wife and I, we've been together for 6 years, married, almost 6 years, almost 4 years married now.
Okay.
And we watch all these different trashy talk shows and stuff like that. and the way they talk about, like, you called your wife a bitch, and they're like, yeah, I was mad. And I was, so
is that what you called it? I can't even. Robert would never.
Yeah.
No.
And I told Michelle, my wife Michelle, I would never talk to you like that.
Right.
Because you're my friend.
Right.
Like, you don't do that.
No.
We've had arguments.
Right. But you're not about to call her out her name and just hit below the belt.
No.
Right.
Because my goal isn't to fight and win and fight.
Or to hurt her.
Right. My goal is to resolve the issue.
Yes.
So, quite literally, if she has a problem, she says her issue, I shut up and I listen. Right. If I have a problem, I say my issue, she shuts up and listens. Right. And then we talk about it.
Right. And then there's a back and forth dialogue. Oh, okay, I misunderstood. I didn't know that's how I made you feel. Right.
And she apologized. That's when I knew I was going to marry my wife, by the way. It was after our first argument, because I was frustrated. I said my piece. She didn't cut me off. And she apologized because she knew she was wrong.
That's a good one. You know, we don't tend to do that.
Because I know.
But, I do, but y'all out there.
Right. And I apologize. I'm always like, you know what? I was wrong. I shouldn't have done that. I have no problem apologizing. Right. So we were on that same level, but that was our foundation. Our foundation was that we were friends before we officially became a couple. Right. We communicate, we talk. Right. We'll
probably a lot and about everything.
Especially during the pandemic.
Ain't nothing else to do but talk. Well,
yeah.
You ain't going nowhere. That's what I meant. Just in-house. Yeah. Talking. Right.
That was like, because I proposed to my wife during the pandemic.
Did you?
Yeah.
Oh.
So, but there were times where we would watch Kevin Samuels together. And she would be like, wait a second. And then we'd pause and we'd talk about it for like 2 hours.
That's what Robert and I used to do.
Yeah. And we were watching that. We didn't even finish.
Right.
So it's that foundation that I think is missing from a lot of relationships, especially, and I'll speak from the guy perspective. Far too many guys find a girl that likes them. They're having sex with them consistently. All right, I like her enough. She's my girlfriend. And then, well, we've been together long enough. I guess I should propose.
Is that their thought process?
That's how they behave.
Yeah, that's true.
Right.
Yeah.
But they're not discerning.
Right.
Right.
They're not picking up on those red flags.
No, because as a man, it is hard to find someone that actually wants to be with you. Right. So when you get into that relationship, that's why most divorces are an issue by women, because the guys don't, even if it's failing,
they'll stay.
They'll stay. They want it. They want it to work.
At first, I didn't believe that, and then I started looking at observable reality, and I'm like, these men are really not leaving like that. They get into a routine. They're just like, oh, this is as good as it's gonna get. Okay, well, I'll make the best of it. Yeah. And they stay. And then it's the women who become so discontent that they are the ones that decide this isn't working for me. And they don't take into consideration the kids, family legacy, the property, none of that. It's just like, I'm out. It's like they decide and then think of the implications of the decision later.
And what's wild is, I think the top reason people get divorced is finances.
Money.
Yeah. And I was like, wait a minute. if you get divorced, that doesn't improve your financial issue. It makes it worse.
We're always fighting about money. Okay, well, I think what drives that is not being content with what you have.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the pressure on men we have to keep up with the Joneses, because my girlfriend over there, they just got their new house and I'm tired of being in this little starter home. You know, all the things that don't make a happy home. Thinking that the children need more versus like, no, the children just need y'all.
Right.
They need to see a healthy, functioning human interaction between a man and a woman. And it's not going to always be, we're always booed up, kissy. I mean, even our kids had got on us like, y'all don't never kiss. And we'd be like, well, for what? Why would we do that in front of y'all? And just realize it. They were like, oh, they kind of, I was like, y'all don't think that we love each other? Yes, we love each other. And then we were like, okay, I guess we got to prove it. But that could just be me. Not, am I affectionate? I am. I can be. Mm-hmm. I can be under the right circumstances. I just can't be I got to feel it. If I don't feel it, But no, I like what you said about these constructs, these categories, the culture, how these childhood traumas and issues are impacting broader society. Outside of that, what's in your book that you want my audience to know that you believe is going to help them move forward, whether it's with their own childhood trauma or possible childhood trauma that they're inflicting on their own children?
Well, for one, if you're the child who's experiencing that trauma, you have to forgive. And this also goes back, because you often have to define what is forgiveness.
Yes.
So forgiveness does not mean it's cool that they abandoned me. It's none of that. Or you get a free pass because you abandoned me.
No.
Forgiveness is for you, not for them. Right. And so because people say, I forgive you, they always think that it's for the other person.
Right.
Forgiveness is for you. It's to release whatever angst, anger, frustration, whatever you have, you're holding on to, resentment, because that stuff goes with you.
It does.
It goes with you into your job, your relationships, everywhere, right? And once you release that, it's just a weight off.
Right.
And on top of that, scripture talks about it.
It does.
This is why.
Right.
This is why you're supposed to. Because what happens is it builds up hatred.
It does.
A sin. Right. So that is why you're told to forgive.
Right.
It's so that you don't build up this resentment, this anger and frustration, and leading into hatred for mankind or for other the opposite sex or these types of people or whatever it might be. Right. Because hatred is infectious.
It does. And the more you feed it, the more it grows and the more it begets more hatred.
Right. And if you're the parent who made mistakes, and so throughout the book, I'm not the perfect parent either, right? But a lot of what I tried to do was my best. I tried to do my best, especially coming from my circumstance.
Right.
I didn't want to be my father.
Absolutely.
And so I made some mistakes. I improved on it. But my child sees that there was a lot of effort, and he has, generally speaking, no complaints about me as a father.
Yeah, we know of.
Yeah.
Right.
And we have a great relationship. He's 19 now.
You do not have a 19-year-old.
Yeah.
That's a whole grown person.
I know.
You look like you could be my kid. I had no idea. Wow.
I started early, 21, so relatively early.
That's still, yeah.
But if you're that parent who messed up, then what I would say is you have to work twice as hard to get into that child's life, and you have to deal with twice as much nonsense. Because I'll give you an example. There's a guy that I came across, so people understand. I talk to people of all different backgrounds.
Okay.
This is a white guy I was talking to who had a divorce, the children, there's all types, taking one side and the other, and they see him in one particular light, and very nice guy, very well intentioned, but he's struggling to get into his kids' lives because they're pushing him away. So it's not him.
So he's accepting, well, since they don't want me, I'm not going to keep pushing.
He doesn't know what to do. He was kind of at the point where, they told me to leave them alone, and I guess I should step back. And I told him, I was like, what you have to understand is you hurt them, and so they know that doing this hurts you. But of course they care.
Right.
Right? If you ever hear them like, I don't care about my dad. I don't
They're
care.
lying.
They're lying. Because if they didn't care, they wouldn't be talking about them.
They wouldn't.
You don't talk about things you don't care about.
You sure
I don't talk about physics.
I really don't talk about physics. You don't hear me talking about no calculus, derivatives, none of that.
Because I genuinely don't care about it. So, of course they care. Of course they're hurt.
Right.
But it's how he's approaching it that's not working. You have to become 100% accountable. You have to say, listen, can I just have a phone call with you?
Right.
And don't make this about, because I think in his situation, he was saying, you know, I hear what you're saying, but that's not exactly what happened.
Right.
And to a kid who's going through that, is like he's dismissing how I feel.
Right.
Because at that point, the facts don't really matter.
Yeah.
It's how they feel. And so you're part of the reason, right or wrong. You're the adult, right?
Yeah.
You're the parent. So you have to take accountability for letting it get to that point. And you have to say, I am sorry. It should have never happened like this.
Right.
I love you. I will always love you. I understand how much I hurt you. I will go off your timeline and I will always be there for you. Right. And they can say, F you. I want nothing to do with you.
Right.
You know what you do? Keep loving them.
You keep loving them.
And because as much time as you abandon them,
right,
they want to show you that same amount of pain. They're hurting, so they want you to hurt. So you have to keep showing. You can't let them like, F you, I don't want anything to do with you.
Like,
like, well, I tried.
Right. Well, that's
keep it moving.
That's typically what happens.
And that's typically what happens. And what that tells them is, say, see, they don't care.
It validates. Yeah, what they already believe.
You already abandoned them. You reached out one time, and they said, here's some pushback. And you said, all right, I tried. Conscious clear.
Right.
I'm going to move on with my life. Validates they didn't actually care because they didn't even try.
Interesting.
Yeah.
One of the last questions or sources of controversy, not necessarily controversy, but I'm always curious when I talk to different people, you know, based on how you write in your book and how you write in, you know, whether you're writing a column, you sound very conservative. But before we hit the record button, you were like, I like to consider myself a Christian. And then you said, I'm more independent.
Yeah.
Help me understand the distinction that you made and why. And like, what drove you to identify yourself that way? I'm curious to know.
Well, many of the viewpoints that I had when I was a Democrat, I still have. It's just that everything has shifted.
Like what?
As a Christian, I know that when we talk about the gay issue,
right?
I know what it is. That's what it is. But I'm also a personal liberty person. And so if you want to get married and you gay, get married. You know why? Because that's between you and the government.
It's not. Are you implying it's not legitimate in terms of what God would acknowledge as a legitimate marriage?
I would say that if you go to a church and they say no, you got your answer.
Right.
Right? It's their church.
Right.
It's in doctrine.
Right.
So no, they don't have to accept that. Right. Now you can come on Sunday, right? And we will love you.
Yes.
But we're not going to acknowledge
We're not doing that.
We're not doing that. Right? So, but that doesn't mean that Bob and Tim can't get on the same insurance plan.
So you're libertarian when it comes to, well, they want rights. They want to be able to leave a legacy. Now, interestingly enough, I found out that Bayard Rustin, you know, I call it the colored communist, you know, engine behind MLK, actually lived in a bona fide state of partnership with an individual that in order to confer those types of legal rights, he adopted him as his kid. Isn't that wild?
I didn't know.
So because they couldn't get married, and there was this huge age gap, and he was a younger white gentleman. Obviously, Bayard Rustin is a gay black man. He legally adopted this guy at the age, I think he was 18 when it happened, which leaves whole other questions. But I'm just saying, he adopted him. And they stayed as that. I mean, he stayed as his partner until Bayard's death. That's how he was able to get access to the estate and the insurance and all those things. And I was just like, wow, they were pretty creative even back then.
Yeah.
I think my only source of contention with that is the fact that they're calling it a marriage. To me, I mean, we can label it whatever we want, but it's not an actual marriage. I mean, marriage is an institution, in my opinion, that God ordained.
Yeah.
And so this is something else. We can call it a civil union. I think it bothered me, the fact that they wanted to put it on par with what you and I have with our spouses. And it's like, yeah, it's not that. It's a counterfeit version of it. But I'm not opposed to, if an individual wants to put someone on their insurance that's not a biological dependent. I don't know. I mean, are we going to give like a male and female couple that's kind of shacking up? Would we give them access to those kinds of rights? Because I think it might diminish what a marriage is, what it actually is.
Well, there's the social and then there's the political.
Right. Okay.
And so the political, actually, we'll say governmental.
Right, governmental.
You know, as far as what the government does, to me, that's what the government is going to do.
Right.
As far as how we see certain things socially, that's something completely different. So there may be plenty of people who see it the exact same way as you.
Right.
And there may be people who see it, oh no, it's on the same level.
Right.
Like ultimately we have no control over that.
Right.
So I think you're seeing it more so from a social. I'm seeing it more so from a governmental.
Right.
Where it's like, if they want to have insurance, they've been together for a long time, and they're just saying, I do at the courthouse.
Right.
I don't really care.
Yeah, we started out that way, but look where that slippery slope led us. Now we ended up to where I've heard someone say it like this. Today it's, we just want to, be on each other's insurance. And then tomorrow it's use my pronouns. Let's teach this to our children. They start introducing it to the school. I thought you were going to go a different route. Where do you think I was going?
Surrogacy.
Lord have mercy. I didn't even think about that.
Yeah. Now I will tell you, I've been wrong plenty of times.
Right.
So I'm not married to anything that I'm saying here.
Right.
If I see a better idea or something, I'll switch to it.
Okay.
But surrogacy is one of those very I am uncomfortable with this.
Yeah.
And this is one of those things where surrogacy was sold as, the woman really wants to have a child. She wasn't able to have a baby. And it's like they tug on your empathy strings.
They
and
do.
You're just like, all right, I guess I could see that. Same thing with assisted suicide. This person's suffering.
They want to go. Let them go in peace.
Let them go in peace. And then we got Canada.
Yeah, I hate killing people.
You got depression? All right.
Just off yourself.
We'll pay for that.
Right. That's crazy to me.
So yeah, surrogacy in many ways, especially when it comes to the gay men who are doing it, it looks, not saying every circumstance,
we have no measurable experience with society and children being raised with these same sex parents. Like, if your book is talking about abandonment and these childhood traumas,
or they're creating abandonment.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Do you not think a child is going to wake up one day and be like, why do I have two daddies? Why do I have two mommies? We don't see this. I just think we're not thinking through it. And so, I am so glad. While I appreciate you're like, hey, I'm kind of libertarian on some of these things. I think it's good for us to talk about it, because I don't think many of us have thought through the implications of where some of this stuff leads. And where do we put the stop to say, okay, that's enough? Because then they're going to say, well, you were fine when they were just wanting to be on each other's insurance, but now it's not okay. And we already see the outworkings of it. It's not good.
No, I'm with Katie Faust is very much so on this topic. You're purposely creating an environment where that child has no mother.
No mother.
Right. And especially if she's some stranger, and there's been some oddball, like the mother took the egg from the sister, and all types of weird,
your mom is really your auntie.
It's
but yeah.
I'm very, what it's turned into, I am not comfortable with.
Right.
This feels very much so off.
Oh, it's very off.
It feels, I would go as far as saying demonic in many ways.
Right. Now, some people would say, well, there was a form of surrogacy in the Bible when a woman couldn't have, Hagar and, Sarah. And I'm like, yeah, but we can't run to those stories as standards and examples for what we should go and do likewise.
But I don't think that's the surrogacy that we're dealing with.
No, this is different. I see what you're saying. It is different. But, okay, so you know how your book talks about the parental selfishness?
Yeah.
I think a lot of this is selfishness.
Yeah.
You want to be a gay man. You want to live in a bona fide state of matrimony with this other man. And now you want to bring some kids into it because you just want a white picket fence and the idea of family, but it's really not a real family. It's like a make-believe family.
Yes.
You're not thinking about the kids.
No.
Why are you raising kids like this?
All they need is love. That's all they need. Yeah. I mean, there is so
much confusion.
Yes. Confusion. Yes. And confusion is not of the Lord. So, I mean, this is ultimately the problem with this type of circumstance.
Right.
Listen, there are lots of kids who are out there who are abandoned, who need love.
Yes.
Completely get that. And there may be some really wonderful, well-intentioned gay men who want to adopt a child.
Right.
Okay.
But is that really our go-to?
Yeah. I understand they live in a society where there's a status about being married. There's also a status about having a family. You live in an area where there's probably lots of families and stuff like that. You want to fit in, right? It's just that they just happen to sleep with someone who looks like them, right?
That is wild.
And so they're trying to have their cake and eat it too,
right?
Essentially. But they're dragging children into the mix. Not even dragging, they're creating children.
Right? I mean, some of them in test tubes and labs and
yeah. So I want to be libertarian-esque when it comes to many things.
Right.
But I feel very uncomfortable with, especially how they parade children around.
Oh, they do.
Because I know as a father, I don't do that.
Yeah.
But when you don't have,
it's like, oh, look at my kid.
Yeah, oh, look at them. It's we got the latest Coach bag or something.
Right.
That's how they're holding it. Oh, look. And the kids, especially there's certain videos that get circulated online. The kids look dead in the eyes.
They really do.
I'm just
they're not adjusting well.
This doesn't look.
Right, where do no shade. I might even meet him one day, and Lord willing, I might interview him one day. But Dave Rubin and his boo, don't they have a set of twins?
I think they're twins. Yes.
Yeah, they have twins, and it's at some point, where's the maternal part? Because Dave Rubin is not really. He's not like an effeminate guy.
I've actually met him.
All.
Yeah.
Cool as a fan. I like even watching his content, but it boggles me that I'm like, you thought this was a good idea.
But, I had a friend, and she knows who she is. I had a friend tell me, listen, he's around other conservatives. Mm-hmm. They live a particular life. He wants to fit in, and maybe he is.
But the kids are not trophies to help you. When I want to fit in, I buy a pair of red bottoms. If I'm trying to go into certain circles, I'm like, okay, we'll do a Valentino purse, but I can put those on the shelf when I'm done. Kids are permanent. Yes. They're a part of a heritage and a blessing from the Lord to be shepherded and raised a certain way. And I would even lovingly tell Dave this, this confuses me, Dave, that you made this decision and, you're cool. But you don't think there are going to be some deficiencies with the children? I have deficiencies, and I grew up. I'm the product of a heterosexual marriage that ended in divorce, and my mom raised me alone, and I'm deficient.
Right.
Now, it doesn't make me less valuable in the eyes of God, but there are deficiencies there. And you'd probably say the same thing based on your upbringing. Why would you purposely do this?
I mean, everyone has a rationalization.
Right.
And this is nothing like some sort of shade towards Dave Rubin or his husband. Met Dave's very nice guy, very hospitable, right? But at some point, just like I criticize my mom, I love my mom. I think she's a good person, but she did some selfish things.
Right.
My father did some selfish things. Like, I'm sure I've done some selfish things as a parent.
Absolutely.
So, but like creating a child specifically, it's one thing to, you know, get in some relationship and you get knocked up. And
Right.
you know,
But it's like, no, we're doing this.
Yeah. And you kind of figure it out, or it doesn't work. You get
like
married.
We're getting our kids
out.
in about 3 months.
Yeah. Right. You're like, you're signing contracts and creating,
right,
you know, an entire situation that didn't have to be that way.
And it didn't even happen organically. These were choices you made, and a lot of the choices we made. I made choices 5 years ago that I'm like, I would have never. If I had the same choice today, I would not have done that.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's no shade to the conservative movement. I understand we want to be more broad and big tent and all that stuff like that. Some of this stuff is a Trojan horse. It is a Trojan horse. And at what point you're no longer conservative? You're a moderate at that point that has some conservative checkbox that you are checking. And that's kind of how I would put Dave Rubin. I mean, I remember when he was a leftist, and I always thought he was a very level-headed, fair dealing leftist.
Mm-hmm.
And when he sat down with Larry Elder, and one by one, Larry Elder just destroyed his entire worldview, and I saw him make that shift, I was like, so see how easy that was?
Mm-hmm.
It was amazing to watch. But I think for me as a Christian, it made me also realize that I don't care how many conservative check boxes you mark apart from Christ, you're going to, it's not going to work. Well, it's not going to work.
This is also why I don't personally, whatever people call me is what they call me.
Right.
But I don't personally call myself a Christian conservative.
You just call yourself a Christian.
I call myself a Christian.
I like that.
And part of the reason is because, one, everybody has their idea of what a conservative is.
That's
so
true.
You're not a real one, and it becomes.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. So that's a whole other thing. But the other thing is that there is a box of expectations. And so for me, I just want to be able to think for myself, right, and also go off of what I know is moral.
Right.
And if I see a Republican who is misappropriating his power,
right,
and doing some shady stuff, I want to be able to call him out
without fear of you're bucking the system.
Right. Or you're going to mess this up for this election or some,
right. I've
some
heard
dumb
that.
Stuff. And it's just like, are you for or against evil?
Come on.
Like,
I was accused of that when I've been very vocal about MLK. And I remember during that time, people were saying, you just need to wait till after the election to talk about this stuff. Because it's just, we're trying to win more people to our side. And I'm like, I hear you, but I got to deal with this elephant in the room. And so I dealt with the elephant in the room.
Yeah.
I
mean, sometimes you have to.
Yeah.
Sometimes, I will say this, I don't like to beat a dead horse. There's a lot of that.
Yeah, I like dead horses.
Yeah.
Sometimes I just want to see if there's just any life left in the horse and just see him flinch one more time.
Yeah. So I try not to beat a dead horse.
Right.
But there are certain moments where I'm like, it is necessary to talk about this very thing.
Right.
Like there's a couple of articles I'm very proud of to write. And it was criticizing the church. Specifically, it was 2 instances of the Black church.
Come on, that's my alley.
And one of them was when Joe Biden was invited, I can't remember which church it was, but it was in Philadelphia.
I think it was it Big Mother Bethel?
That sounds
similar.
Yeah,
right, I'm close.
Like that, yeah.
Right.
And he went up there and just gave a campaign speech. And I'm asking myself,
it's exactly what it was.
Why would you on Sunday have this man come up and stand at and they always, once again, rationalize. Well, we've always said this is the Lord's house and anybody can come in here.
Lies. They wouldn't let Donald Trump come in there.
Come on now.
That wouldn't have happened. They would never have allowed that. They would have let George Bush come in.
I don't care who it is. You don't let politicians come in
to your pulpit. Why is he here? Well, I told you it's because the Black pulpit pimp preacher, not all, is he works for the Democrat Party. He does their bidding, not all,
Yeah.
but there is a segment
They
of
want to be part of it.
yes, and
if
they're
anything.
already compromised.
Yeah.
They're already compromised, so that's why the Democrat Party will identify those, the compromised ones, and they will offer them for 30 pieces of silver. You're gonna sell out your Lord of Glory. You're gonna do it. And they do it every time.
Yeah.
And they like you said, they know they're doing wrong, but they rationalize it.
They rationalize it. They don't actually see themselves as bad people.
Mm-mm.
Not at all. They think that they'll find some scripture.
Yep.
And remix it and say, well, see,
Yeah.
there you go. We're good for doing that.
I'm a pro-choice pastor. They'll say that.
Right.
And I'm like, so okay. Yeah, I mean, but we've seen that happen a lot. And unfortunately, I don't think it's not gonna decrease anytime soon. And so that's why when you write columns like you do and having this book out, I'm glad that you decided to come by to give us an opportunity to talk about it. I haven't really talked. I've never really sat down and unpacked a lot of the societal mayhem that we see. I've not really unpacked it by identifying. I talk about the family, but I've never put on the stand the childhood abandonment and the parental selfishness.
Yeah.
And so I am eager for my audience. You guys, I need you to grab this, okay? We need you to get The Children We Left Behind. It's by Adam B. Coleman. It is available on Amazon. You can go ahead and buy it. Adam, go ahead and tell my audience how they can find you and what's next on the horizon from you.
They can find it. The book is available everywhere. And there is an audiobook version.
Oh, thank goodness.
It should be coming to Audible soon.
Did you read your audio
I did
book?
not.
You didn't?
I did not. That's not my thing.
I know. I love hearing the author read their own book.
Some people don't care. Some people care.
Right.
But I wasn't able to.
I got you.
It's a lot of legwork.
I know. It's grueling. You're just like, when is this going to be over?
Yeah, and I personally just didn't have the time to do it. But Peter Feliciano is the one who ended up reading it. But it is on Spotify. It's everywhere else. It should be on Audible hopefully within the next week or so.
Oh, yay.
But also they can check out my Substack, adambcoleman.substack.com. With me doing the press tour, I haven't written as much for the New York Post, but I occasionally write for the New York Post.
Yeah.
And I mean, all of this has been a blessing. I'm glad to have you look at it because I'm telling you, once you start looking at people's behavior and
it
just
explains a lot.
You just oh, how were they when they were a kid?
What happened to them?
What happened to them?
So does it mean we should be, last question, should we be more empathetic, or we need to hold an equal tension that, okay, I get this thing happened to you, but you can't unleash on the world as a way to cope with what happened to you.
Both.
Okay.
It's a hard balance.
Right.
Because that dude who's breaking into your car, it's hard to be empathetic to the guy who's breaking into your car.
Broke into my car.
Right? But when you peel it back and you hear the stories, they were abandoned by both their parents. They were in foster care. They were physically, sexually abused.
They moved around a lot.
And they don't care. They're hopeless.
Right.
They have no hope. That's why you hear
and
them.
I think you would say you got to a point where you felt like you had no hope. That's why that breakdown came when it did. Yeah. There are so many children that really feel hopeless. And they're not looking for more things or stuff. They're looking for stability and structure, and most of all, the love from their parents.
Yes.
With an S.
Parents.
Right. Okay, awesome. Well, it's been a pleasure sitting down with you guys. The Children We Left Behind, available on all platforms by Adam B. Coleman. Thank you so much for sitting down with me. And until next time, you guys, grace and peace.